Welcome to Rock the Diploma's ELA 30-2 Diploma Preparation session on the visual reflection. As I told you in our previous session, this is the first assignment in the Part A. So let's take a look. So for this session, we're carrying on with Booklet 1 and we're starting on page 5. And this that you see here, this is the first page inside your Diploma Exam Part A booklet. This is just some of the basic information for the entire exam. So the first thing you see is the time that's allotted you for this exam, which is 3 hours, but again, with the double time, that's 6 for your entire Part A. You see the breakdown of the actual assignment and how much everything is worth. You see the materials you're allowed to take in with you, which could be an English or bilingual dictionary, a thesaurus, and one of those approved, authorized writing handbooks if you've got one, and just some basic instructions here for you. But it's everything that we've already covered. So let's take a look here specifically at the visual reflection. So in the visual reflection assignment, you're asked to reflect upon and support your ideas and impressions regarding a photo, cartoon, drawing, poster, advertisement, or other visual text. You might also have a combination of texts. It might be two photos that are juxtaposed to encourage comparison between the two of them. We'll see examples of that later on in this session. Now, the idea here is being able to identify an idea. You're looking for a topic or an issue that might be present in the visual or visuals, and you're going to explore it. So an example visual here, you can see you've got these 3 children. They're on a bit of a tube or a raft here, and this particular visual comes with a caption. And it says, "Children cross a river in the Philippines on their way to school." Pretty different way of getting to school compared to what I'm sure most of us are used to, but here we go. So you need to be able to identify an issue or a topic present in this. So pause the video for a moment, take a look at this visual and try to figure out what could a person theoretically draw out of it. And then we'll take a look at some options together. So taking a look at issues or topics, perhaps you might want to discuss youth, what it is to be young and the experiences that young people have that might be different or changing their lives compared to when they're adults. You could look at hardship or adversity. I'm not saying that these young people here are necessarily undergoing adversity, but that is something that you could maybe draw out of it and run with. Perhaps looking at survival, the things that people do in order to just survive and make it through their day. You could look at unfamiliar situations, and this is something that I'm sure for the majority of people watching this video, you've never floated on a raft on your way to school. So perhaps you can consider looking at how things are in other places in the world and activities that people undergo and sort of how you feel about that. You could look at the issue of adaptation or innovation, the creative things that people do or have to do in order to get through their lives. You could look at humanitarian aid as a possible option. There are things that people in different areas of the world might benefit from in order to be able to get through their lives. So there are lots of different possibilities here. If you were born in the Philippines and happen to actually spend part of your life there, you might also be able to address this and talk about like nostalgia or experiences that you personally have had there. So lots of options when it comes to looking at potential issues or topics to reflect upon. So this here is what the actual visual reflection assignment page looks like in the diploma exam. It tells you to examine the visual, reflect upon the ideas and impressions suggested by, in this case, it's a photograph. And as we saw, the topic is always the same, or question, it's not really a topic. What ideas and impressions does the photograph suggest to you? It says consider the context. So again, you're provided context via that comment that children in the Philippines are floating on their way to school, right? And develop your response by referring to the photograph. So you need to be able to explore an issue. You need to sort of identify what is significant about that issue. You don't just say, I see people doing this and that shows their adaptation. You know, what is significant about the fact that people adapt to their surroundings in order to live their lives? If it's possible, try to find a personal or even a creative connection to that issue. So if it's a personal one, maybe you have a personal experience that you could write about that relates to this topic. If you're trying to write this as a short story or a journal entry, then perhaps you're heading off in a creative direction because you're creating and making up a situation to discuss that relates to that topic. And it's important to try to come up with, and you're drawing this out of the significance, is there like an action plan or a particular response that you or members of our society or people in the, across the world in general should have in order to respond to this issue? You can see here that we've got the initial planning. And it's important to always fill this out because you're giving your grader an idea of what you're trying to do, what the idea is that you're exploring, and how you're going about exploring it. The planning page can never hurt you. It can only help you because it's clarifying what you're trying to do for the grader. So if something's a little bit convoluted in your actual response, but by reading this, the marker goes, "Oh, I get it," you get credit for that. So always fill out the planning. So we're jumping ahead to page 14 here in the booklet. We're going to be moving back and forth around in the booklet, so I'll make sure to always be paying attention to this top right corner to see what page we're on. In this session, we're doing that because we're focusing on just the visual reflection, not taking a look at the literary exploration or the persuasive writing in context. So on this page here, we've got the rubric, and you can see you're marked in two areas here. You have ideas and impressions and presentation. So as with all three of the assignments, these are marked in 20% increments as you move up from poor through excellent. So 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100%, and you have two different categories. And if you take a look at some of the topic key or the rubric keywords that we've got here, for ideas and impressions, it's the perceptions are incomprehensible or unexplored. You probably tried to identify some sort of an issue, so it avoided an INS, an insufficient. However, the student here just does absolutely nothing with it. And so there's no evidence of a real exploration of it. Taking a look at limited, there are superficial or inadequately explored ideas. So it was a little bit more clear than what you would see in a poor, but again, it's not completely explored. It's not super clear where you were trying to go with that idea. Then you've got satisfactory. And satisfactory to me is always like, it works. You did what you needed to do, it just didn't move beyond that. So the perceptions are appropriate, but they're generalized. You're not really digging deeply into your idea. Proficient, you have thoughtful, considered, there's specific support for your idea. It's really quite well done. And then you have excellent. You see keywords here like insightful, carefully considered, precise support. It's a very solid exploration of an idea as prompted by the visual. So presentation now covers everything else. It's looking at the writing and the structure and the flow and the voice and all these kinds of things. And notice it says consider the proportion of error in terms of the complexity and length of the response. So there really is sort of a ratio of error here. 10 spelling errors across half a page or one page as opposed to 10 spelling errors across 2 pages, right? Ratio of error. And also the complexity of the writing and the complexity of the idea help balance out some of those errors. So this goes everywhere from, and the pores are pretty rare when it comes to presentation here, but an ambiguous voice, it's incoherent. You have this impeding of communication, meaning that communication is completely stopped. A person can't make it through the response and understand what you're trying to say. Hopefully that's none of you. Then you move into that limited. The student's voice is inconsistent or it's inappropriate. Perhaps you're trying to write an analytical essay, but there's tons of slang and stuff going on there, and it gets really weird and awkward, and the stylistic choices are often unclear, meaning a person usually has to reread sentences multiple times to understand what you're trying to say. Again, the satisfactory, it worked. There were mistakes, but it didn't stop communication in any way. We made it through. It just didn't go any further than that. Taking a look at the proficient, the 80% here, the voice is distinct. It's well considered. Frequently effective stylistic choices. It was good. And then you have the excellent, the 100% here. So the student's voice is engaging and confident. The stylistic choices are precise and effective. Now bear in mind, this doesn't mean that it is 100% error-free. Any of the exemplars that you'll find on Alberta Ed's website showing the standards of student writing, none of them are error-free. But relatively speaking, for first draft writing, it is a solid piece of writing. Now, how do you survive the visual reflection? All right, so we've got 10 steps here for you. So half the battle when writing any exam is simply having a plan and being prepared. When you sit down to write, you need to have a plan and be ready to go. So here are 10 steps to help guide you. Remember to live by the 5 P's. Prior planning prevents poor performance. That's a little alliteration for you there. So step 1 is identifying any contextual assistance or context help for you. So look and see if Alberta Learning has given you any context help for the visual. It will be in italics above or below the pictures provided. This helps create an understanding of the context of the picture, background information such as where were the pictures taken, what year was it taken, etc. Who's the photographer? This could be important as you will likely introduce the text creator in the introduction of your response if you're writing analytically. This information is essential in helping you fully understand the visual or visuals that you're given. So here, with that visual that we saw of the children on the raft, you do have this contextual information here. Children cross a river in the Philippines on their way to school. Now, when you're analyzing the visual, this is step 2. You're going to be brainstorming ideas. You need to ask yourself, is this a comparative or contrast photo? That's when you'll have 2 photos comparing something. Or is it a standalone, a single photo or visual? Now, if it's a comparative photo, what is being compared? The next page that we have here shows you examples of both comparative contrast photos and standalone photos. So stay tuned here in a second. The easiest place to start with the visual is simply asking yourself, what do I see? What is in the visual? You start point form brainstorming everything that you see. Just jot down in point form or a little web graphic organizer on a piece of paper everything that you see. What issues does the visual make you think of? Are there any issues presented in the photo? So some elements to keep in mind here. What gets your attention initially when you look at the picture? What is the first thing that jumps out at you? Is there any contrast or juxtaposition, opposing ideas next to or near each other? Is the picture in black and white or is it in color? If it's in black and white, that's how it was originally published and intended for an audience. It's not like Alberta Ed is trying to save money on ink, right? So that if it's in black and white, that is a stylistic choice. What is the point of focus? Where is your eye drawn to first? That dominant point of focus. What initially gets your attention? What is in the background? Whatever is behind the point of focus. These are all things to take a look at. And always make sure if you've got room, you can just plunk it in that initial planning page, or there is extra room in the booklet for you to be jotting down your ideas. So make sure to do so. So here we have an example of a comparative or contrast set of visuals. This is from January 2009's diploma exam. And you can see that we've got here a little contextual assistance for you. So it says the first photograph features a family from Europe and the second one a family from Africa. Each family is seen at home with the food they would eat in a typical week. You take a look here, you've got all this stuff going on with this family, and then you've got this food here for the second family. So take a quick second here, consider what possible topics might jump out at you, and then we will point out some of them together. So some possibilities for you might be wealth versus poverty, perhaps cultural differences, just asking yourself the question, what provides contentment in life? Is it having a lot of stuff, or is it all the other things in life that can possibly give contentment and fulfillment in life? Ask yourself, what do we really need? Possibly the idea of humanitarian aid. All these are options that a person could possibly write on. Next, we have a standalone visual. So it's just a single visual here for you. So again, pause the video, think about some possible topics that could be explored. So in looking at this, you might possibly be able to discuss fulfillment. What gives a person fulfillment in life based on the fact that this gentleman here is surfing, right? That might be what gives a person like that fulfillment. You could discuss possibly natural disasters, not that we necessarily see a natural disaster here, but the fact that all this debris is present in the water might indicate that at some point something has happened that has drawn all of that stuff out to sea. Speaking of all the stuff there, you could look at pollution, littering, garbage, ruining the natural environment. Perhaps entertainment would be an option. This guy is probably having a good time. There are different things that give people enjoyment in their lives. Risk taking, that's a relatively risky sport in which he's engaging, so that could be something that a person could look at. Perhaps athleticism, sports, finding joy and fulfillment in those areas, possibly even thrill seeking, which ties in with that whole risk taking scenario. And here's yet another visual. Again, pause, come up with some ideas. We'll take a look at it together. So in this visual, what do we have? We've got these young boys climbing this container, jumping onto mattresses. They've got their bikes. There looks like some debris or whatever. I mean, the plywood that they've pulled up here, this box that they're standing on to get up on there. But what issues could we look at? Perhaps poverty. I'm guessing this might be a low socioeconomic area if this is the type of play in which they're engaging. You could tie that into hardship, perhaps making the best of things. I mean, they seem to be having a good time, right? So they're taking advantage of the situation around them. Looking at childhood, and that could be looking at like innocence and fantasy and playing and good times, all that kind of stuff. You could consider perspective, whereas some people would look at this and be like, well, either maybe that's like dangerous or isn't that awful, those poor guys. I mean, maybe these kids are having a grand old time and they absolutely love it. You could think about danger, again, activities in which people might engage that could cause bodily harm. You could think about creativity because, well, this is a fairly creative activity that they're undergoing. Now, some elements to keep in mind when you're looking at these assignments. Is there anything in the forefront or foreground of the visual? What is at the very front of the picture? An example in this one here, at the front of the picture, we've got the food. In this one, you've got this one young man. Here, you've got the dominant point of focus, these children right here, right up front. Is there anything out of focus? If there is, it's intentional and it is important. This choice by the photographer could represent several different ideas. It could be symbolic. Pay attention to body language or facial expressions of the people in the visuals. That could be presenting their attitude towards what's going on, the emotions, all these kinds of things, communication between them. Okay, that can be very important. Is the picture in black and white or in color? Is there any potential symbolism here? And is there any use of shadows or shading? What is the potential symbolism of shadows or shading? So when analyzing a visual, ask yourself, what do I see? What could it mean? What could it represent? Is there potential symbolism? Why is it important? Always move towards that significance. What does this visual make you think of in regards to your own life? Is there any sort of personal connection here? Any way that you can relate to it? So can you connect not just necessarily to the visual, but to the issue that you're drawing out of it? If so, that's something that you probably write on. Does the photo make you think of any experiences from your own personal life? Can you connect personally to this photo or to the issue presented? Is there something that has happened to you that was significant that can be an area that you could explore in this response? And what does this photo make you think of in terms of the world around you? Does it make you think of something specific that may have happened in the past or perhaps more currently, today? Think beyond yourself and beyond the visual itself to consider the world around you. Remember, this can be specific or simply commenting generally or philosophically. So step 3 is making a list of subjects or topics or issues on which you'll be focusing. So remember, this is an open response, not a guided response. So you're not given a specific topic to work with, whereas with the literary exploration, you absolutely are. So because it's an open response, you have to come up with your own subject or topic or issue to focus your response on. So you want to ask yourself the following questions. What is this photograph about? What is the focus of the picture? What issue is being explored? What topics, subjects, or issues does this bring to mind? Subjects or topics or issues may be 1 or 2 words, or it could just be a short phrase. You want to start off by making a list of subjects or topics or issues with which you'll be working. So some examples of that could be facing adversity. It could be wealth versus poverty, appreciation, taking responsibility, the importance of kindness, global responsibility, etc. Now, step 4 is choosing a subject, topic, or issue to focus on. So look at that list of subjects or topics or issues that you made in the previous step. And from there, choose one of them from your list that you want to work with to focus on for writing your response. And you want to ask yourself, what is the issue? What made you think of that issue based on the photo? Why is this significant? And why does it matter? And what can we take away from this? Is there a particular action plan or something that you or society or the world at large could possibly do in response to it? So now we're on to step 5, which is creating your theme thesis controlling idea. Remember that this is very much a theme-based assignment. The question you're asked to address is, what ideas and impressions does the photograph suggest to you? So first things first. Take the subject, topic, issue you chose to work with in step 4 and fill it into the question below. What ideas and impressions does the photo suggest to you regarding whatever that idea is? Now, let's think about the big picture behind this assignment, what your job is. Alberta Learning is prompting you for your thoughts, your ideas, your opinion when asking you for your ideas and impressions. They're asking you what you believe the photograph is suggesting to you. What is the visual trying to get across? Alberta Learning is really asking you to come up with a general statement, a universal idea that this visual is suggesting to you. This is no different than coming up with a theme-based idea or statement that the visual is aiming to get across to the viewer. So think of it this way. When you answer the question, what ideas and impressions does the photograph suggest to you regarding poverty, whatever, phrase your answer, which could be ideas, thoughts, opinion, in a general statement, which is very theme-based in your wording. So now why are we calling your idea THTHCI, or theme thesis controlling idea? When you answer the question that Alberta Learning gives you, you'll respond generally. So creating a universal idea, a general statement, a theme-based idea. This theme-based idea will be the focus of your entire response. Therefore, it is your controlling idea because it's controlling your response. And your job will be to prove this controlling idea. Anytime you're asked to prove an idea in a piece of writing, what do you call the idea that you're proving? A thesis. It's your argument. So how do you prove your theme thesis controlling idea? With supporting evidence. Your supporting evidence can come from the text, which is the visual provided you. It can come from your own personal experience, so some sort of a personal connection you have to it. It could come from the world around you. So just to recap, your idea is a theme-based statement, a generally worded universal idea, a working thesis that you aim to prove with a discussion of supporting evidence, and a controlling idea that will be the focus for your entire response. Moving on to step 6, you now edit your theme thesis controlling idea. So you want it to be as clear as possible. There are many different ways to start off or to possibly template your theme, thesis, controlling idea. Feel free to use the wording that Alberta Learning gives you. So, example, the ideas and impressions that this photograph suggests to me regarding adversity, okay, is that blah, 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 whatever your idea is. You could use a tag statement. So, for example, in the photograph provided, the photographer's name, okay, develops the idea that, and now you have your theme, thesis, controlling idea. You could take the general approach of the main insight developed in the photograph concerning your topic is that, and then you present your idea. Now, step 7, stop. You want to do a brainstorming pit stop for your pre-planning here. So take a few minutes to look back at your brainstorming from step 2 and ask yourself what sort of details, this will be supporting evidence, you can use to prove your theme, thesis, controlling idea. So use your brainstorming as a guide. Highlight the supporting evidence or the details that you want to use in your writing to prove your argument. So remember the approach that we learned. What do you see in the picture? What could it mean? What could it represent? Is there some sort of potential symbolism that you could address? Why is it important to always get at that so what of an idea? And a new question to ask yourself, how could these details represent my theme-based idea, thesis, or controlling idea? You also need to decide if you can connect personally to this picture and your theme, thesis, controlling idea. Would you like to do a personal connection? Could you discuss a time in your life that connects to the visual? All right, finally, step 8. It's time to actually write your response. So if you're handwriting, you don't need to double space your written work. That's fine. As long as it's legible, that's the main thing. If you are typing, please double space your written work and use font size 12. And if you find it difficult, if you're typing with the double spacing, if you find that it's harder to see your ideas, feel free to double space it once you're done, right before printing off. Use your writing checklist and your planning brainstorming pit stop. Using that, write your response. So remember, your goal is to prove your theme-based idea, thesis, controlling idea by discussing details. This could be supporting evidence from the picture, your own personal life experience, and the world around you. Be sure to avoid simply listing everything you see in the picture. You don't just say, I see this and this and this and this and this, and that's all that. That's simply observing. That's almost like a plot summary of the visual. It's not addressing the issue. Your job is to explore, to discuss and explain how the details in the picture prove your theme, thesis, controlling idea. Remember this simple approach to use as your guide when you're using supporting evidence. P, make your point. This point or idea will naturally be a part of your theme, thesis, controlling idea. Think of this as simply, what am I trying to say or prove? Another P, provide proof. Supporting evidence details from what you see in the visual. Okay, you've already planned this out as part of the planning. And then EC, explain and connect back. So explain how what you see in the visual connects back to your theme, thesis, controlling idea. So once you have it written, it's time for step 9, which is editing your response. Remember the importance of editing. You have to make time for this. This is where you improve and make your response as excellent as possible. So it's your goal to prove your theme, thesis, controlling idea using supporting evidence from the visual and or your personal life and or the world around you. Be sure that you have enough supporting evidence and that you accomplish your goal. If you're typing, I encourage you to ask your diploma supervisor to print off your document and edit it on paper. It's proven that you'll catch far more errors when reading on paper versus reading on a screen. And you can jot all your little notes and make your corrections that way. Go back to your actual digital response and change it there and then reprint. Remember to read out loud to catch yourself in any of the errors that are there. Reading aloud, you will hear, and this is like, I don't mean like reading it right out loud in front of all the other people that are trying to do it. Read it aloud in your head. Try to hear it in your mind. You're hearing your missed words, your awkward sentences, incorrect verb tense, run-on sentences, etc. Actually try to listen to yourself reading it in your mind, and that's a lot quicker than just skimming over the words. If you're handwriting, just edit directly on your response. Feel free to cross things out, add sentences, etc. Diploma markers are just happy that you're editing. Believe me, it doesn't have to look perfect. And if you find that there's a sentence you need to add in the middle of a paragraph, just put an asterisk there and a little arrow down, write it in some white space that you've got. Just make it really clear and easy for us to know what goes where, and that's the important thing. And be sure to give your response a title. Your writing deserves a title. Choose something that's relevant, on topic, and engaging for your marker. Now, as part of your editing, you want to go back and just ensure that you truly are focused on your thesis or controlling idea, and that it's just a single one, that you're not trying to do too much or explore more than one topic or issue. And you want to ask yourself, is my response really following through with exploring that idea, or is something incomplete or left out? Is there some random stuff tossed in that you need to pull out of your response? Make sure it's focused. Examine the voice. Now, is the voice appropriate for the prose form? If it's an analytical essay, if it's like a personal discussion, if it's some sort of a creative response, is it appropriate for it? Is it consistent? And go back through the diction, the vocabulary choices that you've selected. Do you need to pull out your thesaurus and find a more descriptive word, but only ever change words out for words that you actually know and understand? A thesaurus is a great way to remind you of a better word that you just didn't think to use initially. Examine the tone. Is that appropriate for the prose form? Is it appropriate for the content and the message that you're creating? Examine the mechanics. The spelling, the grammar, the punctuation, any run-on sentences that might be there, and fix them. Clean up the writing as much as possible. And on to step 10. My favorite step, printing and stapling it into your booklet. Have your diploma supervisor print off your response. You want to staple that response into the examination booklet, and it will be very clear. There will be a page that says staple here. Place your rough draft behind your final draft. So if you took my advice and printed it out and did your editing on that, include it, but it'll be behind your actual final draft. Also write rough draft across the top of it so that the marker, when the marker gets to it, he or she will be like, oh, okay, I know what's going on here. Move on to then the second assignment, the literary exploration. Now, please remember not to straddle. Never straddle more than one assignment at a time. Don't be working on multiples at the same time. Don't hop back and forth between each of the 3 assignments. It'll never end well. You just will not have the focus that you need. You want to focus on one assignment at a time. Complete one fully, following the appropriate steps, and then move on to the next one. Now, if you tend to struggle with writing a visual reflection, sitting down and actually trying to ask yourself, okay, so what process do I follow? This is a method that you can utilize that should result in an effective visual reflection. So let's have some help with the basics here. So this is the intro. So remember that the purpose of an introduction is to give direction to your reader as to what your response will be focusing on. There are certain requirements that must be met within your intro, and stay tuned for the specifics on that. Typically, you work your way from general to specific, hence this triangle that we're going to be looking at. And remember that you have three jobs to accomplish in your introduction. So, job 1, you're going to introduce the subject, topic, issue you're writing about. So again, I'm going to just reinforce the idea that this is an open response, so you have to choose which subject, topic, or issue you're going to be writing about. You can introduce the topic, subject, issue in any way that you like. Just be sure that you mention what it is that you're going to be writing about. It should be approximately 2 to 3 sentences in length. If you need suggestions or ideas, you can combine some of these or just use one. It's totally up to you. Make a general comment about the topic. Then provide a supporting comment or further explanation. Provide a definition of the key words or the topic in your own words, and then provide a supporting comment or further explanation. Provide an explanation or interpretation of the topic keywords. You can ask a question, which could be a rhetorical question, it could be a hypothetical question, and then provide a supporting comment or further explanation. You could provide a real-life example that's relevant to the topic or keyword and then provide a supporting comment. creating a simile or a metaphor, some sort of figurative literary device that relates or connects to the topic. You can come back to the simile or metaphor throughout your response and again in the conclusion. These are all options of how to start off. Job 2 is to introduce the text. This is the visual that you'll be writing about. So introduce the visual or visuals. If you know the text creator or photographer, then mention that person. So here's the example from January of 2009. So the idea of, say, poverty versus wealth is clearly explored in the visuals taken by the photographers Peter Menzel and Faith Deluzio from the book Hungry Planet, What the World Eats. And that was made clear on the side that was where these visuals were taken from. Then, briefly summarize how the visual connects to and reveals the topic or subject or issue you have chosen to write about. So, here's an example. The comparative visuals provided show the contrast between first and third world countries and the difference between what a European family of 4 people typically eats in a week versus an African family of 6. There is an obvious discrepancy between what the two families have available to them to eat. The African family is struggling with poverty, whereas the European family is quite wealthy, having all of their basic needs met, including luxuries. And then job 3 is introducing the theme, thesis, controlling idea. And that is what you'll be then exploring and developing in the majority of the response. And now here's a little help with your conclusion. After you've gone through and explored your theme, thesis, controlling idea, it's time to wrap up the response. Now, remember, never introduce anything new in the conclusion. The purpose of a conclusion is to bring closure to what you've already discussed in the body paragraphs. So if you get to the conclusion and there's something that you're like, oh, I should have mentioned that, find where it belongs, put it in the body of the response, and then write your conclusion. So there are certain requirements that must be met within a conclusion. Typically, you work your way from specific to general, hence the triangle above there. It narrows to wide. So it's the opposite of the intro, which started really general and went to specific. We go from specific to general. Now remember, you have 2 jobs to accomplish in the conclusion. And you should always start with the concluding word of some sort that invites closure to the response, such as in the end, or there is no doubt that, or it is clear that, in summary, to conclude, or when one looks at the issue of, whatever. So, job number 1 is restating your theme, thesis, controlling idea in different words, specifically touching on some of the main points and details from your body paragraphs. This does not have to be very long, approximately 3 to 4 sentences in total. And when you restate your theme, thesis, controlling idea, please use different words. Never just copy and paste it. You want to make sure that you can show that you can rephrase it in a way. Remember the reverse inversion trick. Look at the order that you introduced your theme, thesis, controlling idea in your intro, and now restate your ideas in the opposite order. So by touching on the last part of this idea first and the first part of your idea last, this will avoid restating the exact same thing in the exact same order. Specifically, touch on and summarize details from the visuals that you have discussed in your body paragraphs that support your theme, thesis, controlling idea. Basically, summarize how your supporting evidence in the visual proves your theme, thesis, controlling idea. If you chose to write in a personal connection paragraph of some sort, some experience that you had or how you personally feel about it, feel free to briefly restate your thoughts in your conclusion and bring closure to that. Feel free to restate the title of the visual or the source and or text creator or photographer. And job number 2 is the global view or universal discussion of the theme, thesis, controlling idea. So bring closure to your whole visual response by making some general comments about how your theme, thesis, controlling idea applies to all people in all times, in all places. What does the text and the topic make you think about in terms of the world around you, the past, today, the future? Feel free to discuss specific events from the world around you as supporting evidence, or speak generally or philosophically. Try to generalize beyond just that text and beyond yourself to reflect on the nature of the human condition. This is really getting at the significance that we want to look at in these responses. And generalize about bringing your theme, thesis, controlling idea to bring closure. If you began your visual response with a metaphor, a real-life example from history or from today, or a question, come back to it here now. This frames your entire response. And that does it for the visual reflection. So now it's time for you to do some practicing. So go back through this video, find some of those earlier visuals. Don't just identify the topics or the issue, but actually work through the process, those steps that we have for creating that theme, thesis, controlling idea, figuring out how we would support it. By all means, try to practice writing some and actually go through this process. This is the best way to not only gain confidence and speed up your writing, but also to ensure that you'll wind up with the best, most effective response possible. So that does it for visual reflections. Check out our next session, which will be on the dreaded literary exploration.